Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Exony, and I have a question for you. How many scouts does it take to screw in a light bulb? 12. One to screw it in, and the other 11 to say how much better they could have done it. Good joke, but I'm here to welcome you to Know the Numbers, the Scout. This video is here to talk about all the numbers associated with Scout, from his health, to his movement speed, to his primary weapon damage, to his secondary weapon special abilities, to all of his melee weapons. Any number you could possibly need that's associated with the Scout you will find in this video right here. And if you're looking for a section in particular, say melee weapons, primary weapons, the Scout himself, there'll be annotations and timestamps in the description and on the screen right now. Click on one of these if you want to go to this somewhere, and we're gonna start off with the Scout. So let's start it off by introducing our mercenary for today, the Scout. Born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, he is the fastest and most mobile of all the mercenaries unassisted, meaning he doesn't need rockets to go fast. The Scout's biggest trade-off for his mobility is his low health pool, having only 125 health, making him one of the lighter classes in the game. He can be overhealed to 185 health with any medigun except for the quick fix, which can only overheal him to 158. If the Scout equips the Sandman, his base health will drop to 110, which means he can only be overhealed to 165 with all mediguns, except for the quick fix again, which will overheal the Scout to 139 health. Now the Scout's biggest thing is his speed. So for speed, I'm going to talk about your normal speed, which is the speed you move at while moving forward or left or right, your backward speed, which is the speed you move at while moving backwards, your crouch speed, which is the speed you move at while crouched, and your swimming speed, which is the speed you will move at while swimming. The Scout has a base speed of 133% or 400 hammer units per second, which translates to about 17 miles per hour. But for the purpose of this, we will be referring to the percent movement speed. So keep in mind 100% movement speed is the base speed that classes like the Pyro, Engineer, and Sniper move at. At default speeds, under no extra effects, the Scout will move at 120% movement speed backwards, 44% movement speed while crouched, and 107% movement speed while swimming. Now, the Scout also has some items that affect his movement speed. The first one we'll talk about is the Babyface's Blaster, a Scout primary that increases the speed as you deal damage. But at 0% boost, the Scout will be slower than normal, having a movement speed of 120%, a backwards movement speed of 108%, a crouched movement speed of 40%, and a swimming speed of 96%. Now when you fill that boost meter up by dealing about 100 damage, the Scout will move at an astounding 173%, the fastest speed in the game other than a charging Demonate. While you're at 100% boost, you'll move backwards at 156% movement speed, crouch walk at 58% movement speed, and swim at 139%. The Scout also has a secondary weapon that affects his speed, the Criticola. Under the effects of the Criticola, the Scout will move at 167% movement speed for 8 seconds. While under this effect, you also move backwards at 150%, crouch walk at 56%, and swim at 133% movement speed. Then finally, we can combine the effects of the Criticola and the Babyface's Blaster. At 0% boost, and under the effects of Criticola, the Scout will move at 150% movement speed. He will also move backwards at 135%, crouch walk at 50%, and swim at 120%. Now, you might be asking, what happens if I drink the Criticola while I have 100% boost? Well, the thing is, they don't stack at that point. The Scout's movement speed will cap, and it'll be the exact same as if you just had the Babyface Blaster at 100%. So, nothing special there. And finally, the Scout has two abilities that make him a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. The first one is that he counts as two bodies when capturing objectives or pushing payloads and things like that. The Scout is the only class in the game who has this ability by default, making him the best at securing objectives. While the Scout is the fastest class in the game, it's his double jump that makes him incredibly mobile. The Scout's ability to jump once airborne lets him avoid rockets and other projectiles, change direction in mid-air to confuse things like heavies, and maneuver his way around the map to gain an advantage in the fight. This ability to perform jump in mid-air is the Scout's greatest asset. Okay, so we're going to start with the primary weapons, but before we do, we're going to start with this screen right here. There's going to be an annotation on each of these weapons to take you to the part of the video where it's talking about them in case you were looking for a certain part. And I also want to describe what I mean by things I'm going to be saying, because I'm going to be using terms like maximum damage, base damage, and least amount of damage that the weapon can possibly do. So I want to get these terms out of the way before we start. So if you want to skip this, click on one of the annotations here and go to the weapon you want to see. But if you want to have a bit of clarification of what I'm talking about, stick around here and I'll tell you. Okay, you're still here? Cool. So let me just get this blackboard in here. Okay. Now that this is here, we can get started. So whenever I talk about a weapon, the first thing I'm going to know is its name, what it looks like, and how much ammo it has. So ammo loaded versus ammo stored is how much ammo you have in the weapon and how much ammo you have in reserve to be reloaded. After that, we'll go on to damage. And damage is interesting because all of the Scout's primaries are shotgun weapons, meaning they shoot multiple pellets. So first I'll tell you the maximum damage each pellet can do individually. This means the damage that the pellet will do at the closest range possible to your target. Then we'll do the base, which is at a medium range, which if you can imagine from one spawn door in 2 Fort to the wall, that's about medium range. And then we have minimum range, which is from one battlement on 2 Fort to the other. Then we discuss pellet count, which is how many pellets the shotgun will shoot. Then the next three numbers, point blank damage, medium range damage, and long range damage, are all variable, so they're going to be an average like 92 through 113 because this number isn't set in stone because of weapon spread and depending on how many pellets you hit. This number is just acquired by multiplying the damage at that range by the pellets. And then the last thing is, well, for damage is critical and mini crit damage, which will just kind of be oversighted because I'm just going to say those and they'll be done, and it's damage per pellet like I do with the others. And then one important thing to note about critical hits and mini crits is critical hits will do the same damage at any range, while mini crits still have a ramp up. So they will go up to the maximum range, so meat shot will still do more damage than any other range, but there's no technical fall off on them. So they will always do the lower number all the time per pellet, but if you're super close to your target, it'll do extra damage. And finally, we'll have the function times. And for function times, it's the timings involved with the weapon. So the first one we'll talk about is the attack interval, which is how long in between shots do you have to wait. So with something that fires fast, like the Force of Nature, it'll take 0.315 seconds for you to fire again. And for something like the Scattergun, it'll take almost double that. So this number it's going to be a longer decimal, and you don't really need to know it. It's more of an average. You could just say 1/3 or 3/10 for that. It's just there to know the number. Now, then the next number there will be the reload, and depending on which weapon it is, it will either have one or two numbers. If it has one number, that means it reloads its entire clip at once, like the Force of Nature, the Shortstop, and the Soda Popper. But if you have a weapon like the Scattergun, the Backscatter, or the Babyface's Blaster, the reloading works a bit differently. So I'm going to go over this really quick. I think I'll go over this again later, but just in case. So your first reload will take longer than all consecutive reloads after it, meaning if you reload, fire, reload again, that's going to be less efficient than firing and reloading twice, because the second reload will take a shorter amount of time than the first reload because of this mechanic. Then after that, I'll wipe the screen and I'll bring up gameplay and I'll talk about any special features that the weapon has, and yeah, that's about it. So let's get into it. I hope this wasn't too long-winded, and I hope you enjoy. So let's start with the Scout's stock primary weapon, the Scattergun. The Scattergun is a short, double-barreled lever-action shotgun with a wooden handle and foregrip. It loads 6 shots and stores an additional 32 ammo in reserve. The Scattergun has a maximum damage ramp of 175% at close range compared to the generic shotgun carried by the Soldier, Pyro, Heavy, and Engineer, giving it a maximum damage of 10.5 per pellet, with a base damage of 6 damage per pellet. At maximum damage fall-off, it'll only do about 3 damage per pellet. Now, the Scattergun shoots 10 pellets per shot, with one going straight into the crosshair regardless of whether random weapon spread is on or off. With random weapon spread disabled, the pellets will form a 3x3 grid with 2 pellets going into the center. At point blank range, you can expect to do 90 to 105 damage, at medium range 10 to 40 damage, and at long range 3 to 10, making it highly ineffective for fighting at range and extremely efficient at fighting at close range. Last thing for damage is critical. A critical Scattergun shot will do 18 damage per pellet at any range, and a mini crit will do 8 to 14 damage depending on the range from the target. The last thing to say about the Scattergun is the attack intervals. The Scattergun can fire every 0.625 seconds, and like any other weapon that reloads each shot individually, the first reload is slower than all consecutive reloads, meaning that reloading once, firing, and reloading is less efficient than reloading multiple shots. The first reload takes 0.76 seconds, while all consecutive reloads after that one take only 0.56 seconds. Now let's move on to the next Scout primary weapon, the Force of Nature. The Force of Nature, also referred to as the Fan, is a large double-barreled shotgun with a sawn-off barrel and wooden stock. Compared to the stock, the Force of Nature's clip size is significantly smaller, only having 2 shots instead of 6, but still having the same amount of ammo in reserve. Each pellet from the Force of Nature will deal slightly less damage than its Scattergun counterpart, dealing a maximum of 9.45 damage per pellet with a base of 5.4 damage. At maximum fall-off, you can only expect expect to do about 2.7 damage per pellet. The Force of Nature makes up for its slightly reduced damage by shooting 12 pellets compared to the Scattergun's 10, giving it a slightly higher damage output potential, dealing a maximum of 113 damage at close range, 11 to 43 damage at medium range, and 3 to 11 at long range. So much like the Scattergun, it is extremely effective at close range and poor at longer ranges. And to wrap it up with damage, while crit boosted, the Force of Nature will do 16 damage per pellet at any range, and mini crits will do 7 to 12 damage depending on how far you are away from your target. The Force of Nature fires almost twice as fast as the stock Scattergun, having an attack interval of 0.315 seconds in between shots, and unlike the stock Scattergun, it reloads its entire clip at once, but it takes much longer, 1.652 seconds to be exact. One important thing to note about the Force of Nature's reload is that it will always consume 2 ammo from your reserve. Now that those numbers are out of the way, we can talk about the Force of Nature's knockback abilities. When dealing a minimum of 40 damage to an opposing player, the Force of Nature will push them back. The distance pushed is proportionate to the distance between you and the enemy, so the closer you are when you land the shot, the further they will go. Because of this, no knockback will be applied at long distances. There is also a 1.5 second delay before any enemy can be knocked around by the Force of Nature again. This knockback also slightly affects the scout, effectively giving him a triple jump when firing mid-air. Alright, up next we have the Shortstop, a 4-barreled pepper box that is more similar to the Scout's pistol than it is to any of the other shotguns. The Shortstop is a medium-range scout weapon that stores 4 ammo with 36 in reserve. The Shortstop deals the most damage per pellet of any of the Scout's primaries, dealing a whopping 18 damage per pellet at the maximum ramp-up with a base of 12 damage and doing a minimum of 6 damage per pellet. The Shortstop's biggest drawback for this extra damage is that it only shoots 4 pellets per shot, less than half of the Scattergun's pellet count, giving it a maximum damage of only 72, which leaves it quite lacking in the close range department compared to the other primaries, but the Shortstop makes up for its lack of close range damage by having about a 40% tighter spread than the stock Scattergun, making it much better suited for medium range combat, with damage averaging from 24 to 48. But like all the other primaries, it is lacking at long ranges and can only do about 6 to 12 damage, and the critical damage is 36 per pellet, while the mini crits do 16 to 24 depending on your range to the target. The Shortstop fires almost as fast as the Force of Nature with an attack interval of 0.36 seconds, and much like the Force of Nature, it reloads all of its shots at once, taking 1.52 seconds. This means that the Shortstop is quite good for peppering enemies and quickly doing decent damage while maintaining your distance. The Shortstop's also got some special effects on it, one of which is a 20% increase in knockback taken from all sources while it's your active weapon. This means if you get air blasted, hit by the Force of Nature, or anything else that inflicts knockback like rockets, anything, you're going extra far. The other special feature about this weapon is its alternate fire. When you press your alternate fire, the scout will shove enemies in melee range about the same distance as an air blast while dealing 1 damage. This shove can be used to put enemies at a more favorable distance for your Shortstop or push enemies into environmental hazards. The shove has a slight delay of 1.5 seconds until you can shove again, and you cannot shove while reloading. And any kill made with a shove will not count as a kill for the player, but as a suicide for the enemy. The Soda Popper is one of the more interesting scout primaries. It is a broken Force of Nature held together with several black bands and a can of Criticola strapped to the barrels. Much like the Force of Nature, it loads 2 shots and stores an additional 32. The Soda Popper deals the same damage per pellet as a stock Scattergun with a maximum ramp up of 10.5 per pellet, a base of 6 damage per pellet, and a minimum of 3 damage per pellet. The Soda Popper also shoots 10 damage per pellet, identical to the stock Scattergun, giving it a maximum damage of 105 at close range, 24 to 67 at medium range, and 3 to 26 at long range. On critical hits, it will deal 18 damage per pellet, and on mini crits, it will deal 8 to 14 damage per pellet. So the Soda Popper matches the damage of the Scattergun exactly, but fires twice as fast with an attack interval of 0.315 seconds and reloads its entire clip at once in 1.23 seconds, which is much faster than the Force of Nature. The interesting part of this weapon is its alternate fire. When equipped, you will have a hype meter on your HUD which fills with how much damage you do, taking 350 damage to fill it all the way up. The meter can be filled with any weapon, not just your Soda Popper, so your secondaries and your melee weapons as well. When the meter has been filled, using the alternate fire will cause your gun to glow purple and allow you to jump 5 extra times in midair. This gives the scout incredible mobility for 10 seconds when the effect wears off, and the meter must be refilled. The atomizer will have no effect on the scout when the hype is active, and it will not grant an additional jump on top of the 5 granted by hype. The next weapon in the Scout's arsenal is the Babyface's Blaster, which I will be calling the Blaster for the rest of this because I don't want to keep saying Babyface's Blaster. The Blaster is a short lever-action shotgun with a wooden handle and a single barrel. It loads 4 shots and holds 32 in reserve. The Blaster's damage is identical to the Scatterguns and the Soda Poppers, so it does a maximum of 10.5 damage per pellet, has a base of 6 damage, and a minimum of 3 per pellet. It shoots 10 pellets, giving you a maximum damage of 105. At medium range, it will do 10 to 40, and at long ranges it will do about 3 to 10. On critical hits you can do 18 damage per pellet, and on mini crits you will do 8 to 14 damage depending on the distance to your target. The function times are also identical to the Scatterguns, with an attack interval of 0.625 seconds in between shots, a first reload speed of 0.76 seconds, and all consecutive reloads take 0.56 seconds. So the Blaster is identical to the Scattergun in every area except for clip size. So what makes the Blaster unique? Well, you start off moving slower at about 120% movement speed, and you'll have a boost meter on your HUD. As you deal damage, this meter will start to fill up and the Scout will begin to move faster. After dealing about 100 damage, the Scout will be moving at 173% movement speed, the fastest movement in the speed in the game besides a demo man charging. Now, this boost is a cruel mistress. You lose your boost meter when you get hit, losing 4% of your charge for every point of damage you take. So if you take 25 damage or more, you will lose all boost you have no matter what. That's a stray rocket, that's a couple of sentry bullets, so this boost goes away incredibly fast. You also lose 75% of your boost for each air jump you perform. So jumping off the ground is fine, but if you perform a jump in the air to maneuver, you'll lose 75% of your boost. The last thing about the Babyface's Blaster is I say about 100 damage, because if you do less than 5 damage, you'll still build 5% of the boost. So doing 1 damage will still give you 5 out of 100 of your boost meter. So it's only about 100 damage, but it's not very hard to fill up. It takes about 1 meat shot, 1 good solid Scattergun shot, 2 like okay shots or a few pistol fire, and you'll have it. So you may lose it really fast, but it's also not very hard to regain. Now for the final primary weapon, we have the Backscatter. The Backscatter is a short lever action shotgun with a wooden handle, a single barrel, and a dual shell drum. It loads 4 shells at a time and stores 32 ammo in reserve. The Backscatter's damage is identical to the Scattergun, so it does a maximum of 10.5 per pellet, has a base damage of 6, and a minimum of 3 damage per pellet. The Backscatter shoots 10 pellets per shot with a 20% greater spread than the Scattergun, making it horribly inaccurate even at medium ranges. The Backscatter has a maximum damage of 105. At medium ranges, it will do 10 to 40, and at long ranges, it will do 3 to 10. It's important to note with the Backscatter that medium ranges are much closer than with normal Scatterguns. On a critical hit, you can do 18 damage per pellet, and on mini crits, you will do 8 to 14 damage depending on your distance to the target. The Backscatter's function times are all identical to the Scatterguns, with an attack interval of 0.625 seconds in between shots, a first reload speed of 0.76 seconds, and all consecutive reloads after the first will take 0.56 seconds. The Backscatter will mini crit enemies if shot from behind within 500 hammer units. This gives it an incredible surprise potential if you catch people off guard using flank routes, but it also rewards scouts who stay close to their targets, jumping over them to get mini crits. You also have to remember that this weapon has wider spread, so to truly make use and get the most out of the mini crits, you have to get right up in the enemy. Hey, you made it through the primary weapons, good for you. So now we're going to move on to the secondary weapons, and we're going to do the pistol, the winger, and the pretty boy's pocket pistol first, because all 3 of those share stats with each other, and they all fire and work in the same way. Then we're going to do the 2 drinks, the Bonk Atomic Punch and the Criticola, followed by the Mad Milk, and then the Guillotine. I'm doing it this way, and not the way I did the primaries in the order they were released, is because I want to do them sort of in the category that they're in. So the pistols together, the drinks together, and then the Mad Milk and the Guillotine are sort of oddities in all of this. So if you're looking for any specific one of these, so say you just want to go to the winger, there'll be an annotation on the winger. There's also timestamps in the description below. And without any further fluff, let's get into these. Now let's kick off the secondary weapons with a classic. I'm talking of course about the pistol. The Scout's pistol is a semi-automatic pistol with a hair trigger that fires all of its bullets from a cartridge magazine. It loads 12 bullets at a time with 36 in reserve. While the pistol is not extremely accurate at longer ranges, it is still more accurate than the Scattergun, making it extremely useful for finishing off enemies who have escaped the range of your Scattergun. The pistol deals out moderate damage, dealing 22 damage at point blank, 15 base damage, and at maximum fall off, it only deals about 8 damage. On critical hits, it deals 45 damage a shot, and on mini crits, it will deal from 20 to 30 damage per bullet. The pistol deals relatively low damage when compared to other weapons, but it more than makes up for it with its fire rate. The pistol has an incredibly fast attack interval of 0.17 seconds in between shots and a reload speed of 1.25 seconds. So you can empty clips of this into enemies, and even though at medium ranges the spread is kinda bad, you can still pick off people at low health, chip away from sentries at a relatively high speed. And the last thing about the pistol is the spread recovery of 1.25 seconds. To understand what this means, you have to know that the pistol's first shot is always perfectly accurate, and all other shots taken after are affected by bullet spread. But if you wait at least 1.25 seconds, which is the spread recovery time, and it's also equivalent to the reload time of the pistol, your next shot will be perfectly accurate. So pretty much, waiting and timing your shots is incredibly effective because it'll make it way more accurate. The next pistol we'll be talking about is the Winger. The Winger is a bluish pistol with a small pair of yellow wings emblazoned on the side. The Winger deals more damage than the stock pistol at the cost of clip size, only loading 5 shots and storing the normal 36. The Winger does 15% more damage than the stock pistol, making it deal 26 damage at point blank with a base of 17 damage and dealing a minimum damage of 10. On critical hits, it will deal 52 damage, and on mini crits, it will do from 23 to 35 damage. The Winger's function times are similar to the pistol, and in fact, they're exactly the same, with an attack interval of 0.17 seconds in between shots and a reload speed of 1.25 seconds, along with the 1.25 second spread recovery. The Winger is set aside by its active ability, allowing the scout to jump 25% higher on all jumps. This means as long as it's your active weapon, you're jumping higher, whether it's your first air jump, your atomizer triple jump, or all of your soda popper jumps. It applies to all jumps that the scout will ever make. This allows the scout to access places and routes previously unavailable to him. Next up, we have the Babyface's Blaster's partner in crime, the Pretty Boy's pocket pistol, which for the rest of this I will be calling the pocket pistol for simplicity's sake. The pocket pistol is a small black pistol with a short barrel and a light colored wooden grip. It loads 12 shots and holds 36 ammo in reserve. The pocket pistol's damage is the same as the stock pistols, dealing 22 damage at point blank, 15 base damage, and at maximum fall off it only deals 8 damage. On critical hits it deals 45 damage a shot, and on mini crits it will deal from 20 to 30 damage per bullet. While the pocket pistol does the same damage as the pistol, it falls off when it comes to firing speed, having an attack interval of 0.2125 seconds, which is 25% slower than the pistol, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you fire it, you can feel it. However, it does share the pistol's 1.25 second reload speed and the pistol's 1.25 second reload spread accuracy. So what's special about the pocket pistol? Well, it's got some extra effects, the first of which is that the active user takes no fall damage, which is pretty nice if you pull it out while you're falling. That's right, 0 fall damage. But wait, that's not all. It also awards players 5 health on each hit, so if you're close to someone and you're hitting them with the pistol, you're recovering 5 health. Now you might be thinking, wow, this sounds really good. All I'm trading this off for is some firing speed? Well, there's another downside, and it's kind of big. So, while you have the pocket pistol out, you take 20% more damage from all sources while active. This means if you get hit by a rocket that does 100 damage, you're taking 120 damage. So everything that could hit you and do damage will be doing 20% more. So while you may be healing, you're also going to be taking more damage. Now that we've gotten all the pistols out of the way, let's go to the Scout's other secondary weapons, starting with the Bonk Atomic Punch. The Bonk Atomic Punch doesn't function like any of the weapons we've talked about so far, mostly because it's not a weapon like the pistols and the Scatterguns have been. The Bonk Atomic Punch is a team-colored energy drink. Let's talk about the function times first, then we'll talk about what it does. So, when used, the Scout has a 1.2 second animation of him drinking that he can be knocked out of or he can still be hurt while doing it. After that, he has 8 seconds of invulnerability, and after it wears off, it's on a 22-second cooldown. So I mentioned invulnerability, so let's talk about the effects of Bonk. While under the effects of Bonk, the player is immune to most all forms of damage other than environmental, and taking no damage is pretty cool. But you can't drink the Bonk while you're carrying the intelligence, you cannot pick up the intelligence while under the effects of Bonk, you cannot capture or defend control points or payloads while under the effect of Bonk. In fact, you can't even fire your weapon. You can only reload, move around, and jump. Damage over time effects like afterburn and bleeding will not do damage to you while you're under the effects of Bonk, but if the effect keeps going after bonk is worn off, you will keep taking that damage. On-hit effects that don't require damage done, like the Ubersaw's Uber gain, will still give the bonus of that. So if a medic hits a scout that's bonked up while with his Ubersaw, that medic will gain 25% Uber charge. But say a pyro using the Phlogistinator who starts burning him won't gain any oomph meter because no damage is technically done. So this means soldier backpacks will also gain no charge. The scout can also be killed by environmental hazards while under the effects of bonk, so pushing the scout off a cliff or into a pit will still kill him. The bonk's animation for drinking can be interrupted by knockback, so if you are air blasted by a pyro in the drinking animation, the bonk will be cancelled, but it'll still consume that usage of it while you don't have the effect. The bonk cannot be used in instances where you are unable to taunt, so underwater or in midair. Even though you cannot fire while under the effects of bonk, you can still move, jump, and reload, and taunt. So, going for that sick taunt kill while under its effects is pretty viable. And last thing to mention about bonk is if you're under the effects of it and you touch a resupply cabinet, it instantly ends. Now the scout has another drink in his arsenal, the Criticola. The Criticola is a purple soda can manufactured by the Bonk company, sporting the tagline "Manliness Guaranteed." The Criticola functions identically to the Bonk Atomic Punch when it comes to the timings, taking 1.2 seconds to drink, and the effects last 8 seconds with a 22-second cooldown. The big difference is after the 8 seconds are up, the scout is marked for death for an additional 2 seconds afterwards, meaning that the scout will be taking mini crits from all sources for the next 2 seconds after the effect wears off. Now, unlike the Bonk Atomic Punch, the Criticola doesn't grant invulnerability. Instead, it heightens the scout's combat abilities. It makes the scout deal mini crits with all of his weapons for the duration of the buff, meaning that the scout gains incredible damage potential for the duration, as well as increasing the scout's speed by 25%, all for the cost of taking 10% more damage from all sources while under the effects of Criticola. The Criticola also has some after effects. For 2 seconds after the Criticola wears off, the scout will take mini crits from all sources, making this ideal for buffing up, then running in and getting damage out, then backing out with your additional movement speed before the mini crits take place, making it an ideal flanking scout weapon. Next up is another drink type item with a twist. The scout doesn't drink the mad milk, he throws it at his enemies instead, and yes, you guessed it correctly, this weapon is a bottle of milk. Now, when it comes to function times, it only has 2 numbers to worry about. Its recharge time of 20 seconds and the effect duration of 10 seconds. The effect duration actually has 2 numbers because mad milk goes away faster when the person who's affected by it is being healed by a medic or a dispenser. So if you're ever milked by a scout or Gerardied by a sniper, go stand next to a dispenser or get healed by a friendly medic and it'll go away in 2.5 seconds at maximum. So it's really effective at getting rid of it. When you throw the milk, it covers enemies in dripping white beads for 10 seconds. Anyone who deals damage to a soaked enemy player gains 60% of the damage they deal back as health, with the exception of damage over time effects like afterburn and sentry gun damage won't return health. You cannot be overhealed from the milk healing, and it can be thrown at burning teammates to extinguish them, which cuts the recharge time by 20%, which leaves only a 16-second period to recharge instead of 20. When thrown on enemy spies, they have a dripping white effect on them, even while cloaked or disguised, making it much easier to track them down. And finally, the mad milk can be reflected by enemy pyros, and then it'll give them the effects for their team. Finally, we have the last, but certainly not the least secondary weapon, the flying guillotine. The guillotine is a meat cleaver with the Chinese characters for dead meat above the grip. It functions with a recharge time like the previous secondaries with an incredibly quick recharge of 6 seconds. It also inflicts bleed damage when it hits an enemy that lasts for 5 seconds, dealing a tick of damage every half second. So this means that the bleed damage is procced every half second, so 2 a second. Speaking of damage, the guillotine deals base damage of 50 at any range. On a crit, it does 150 damage. On a mini crits, it will deal 68 damage. When you land a guillotine, the enemy takes bleed damage, so a normal bleed will do 4 damage every half second, so 8 damage a second for 5 seconds, giving it a total of 40 damage over time. If you hit a stunned player, the bleed ticks will be critical bleed ticks for as long as the player is stunned, dealing 12 damage every tick, so 24 damage a second. But this only lasts as long as the player is stunned. The second they are unstunned, it will start doing 4 damage per tick again. So I mentioned the bleed does critical damage against stun targets, but if you hit a stun target with just the guillotine, it's a guaranteed critical hit dealing 150 damage as well as the bleed. The stun can be an enemy stunned with the Sandman ball most traditionally, but it can also crit on enemies when they are being air blasted or enemies when they are being slowed by the Natasha bullets, because these count as stun effects as well. The guillotine also has a maximum range where upon traveling enough distance, it will act as if it has landed and do no damage to any enemies it hits from there on out. The cleaver can do no damage to engineer buildings, so you can't really use it for taking out a sentry. And the Flying Guillotine has no damage type, unlike the other scout weapons we've talked about, which have all been bullet type weapons, so it cannot be resisted with the Vaccinator. And finally, reflected guillotines will not deal mini crits like most all other projectiles when reflected by a pyro. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're into the final stretch here. That's right, we're finally to the Scout's melee weapons, what everyone's been waiting for. Now, like the other ones, there's going to be annotations on the screen right here for the ones that you want to go to. So say you want to go to the atomizer, but you want to skip everything up to that point, just click on it right here, go into the description, and there'll be timestamps down there. Now, quick things to say before we get into the melee weapons. A lot of these don't have a lot of numbers when it comes to damage, minus the Boston Basher and the Rap Assassin because of their bleed. Things like the Bat, the Candy Cane, the Fan of War, the Atomizer all have similar damage numbers and function times, so there's not a whole lot for me to say there. So if there's not a lot of meat to that, there's going to be a lot more meat when it comes to the special effects, like the Fish's kill feed, the Candy Cane's dropping health packs, the Fan of War's marked for death. So there's going to be a lot more time spent on that, but this section as a whole will probably be shorter than any of the other sections up to this point, which you might be relieved about. But without further fluff, let's get to it. Let's start off the melee weapons with everyone's favorite, the Bat. It's an aluminum baseball bat sporting a rubber grip, a fading green label, and a large dent on its side. The Bat is the Scout's default melee weapon, and there's really not much to say about it. It does less damage than any other stock melee weapon in the game, dealing 35 damage a hit, 105 damage on criticals, and on mini crits it deals 47 damage. It makes up for its lack of damage by swinging 37% faster than the other stock melee weapons carried by the other classes, with an attack interval of 0.5 seconds, meaning that you can swing twice in 1 second. Due to its relatively low damage compared to the Scout's other options for close range, it doesn't find itself being used very often when you can just use the Scattergun or the pistols. And because it's exactly identical in most every way, I'm also going to talk about the Holy Mackerel here as well. So we're just going to get rid of that Bat, move a Holy Mackerel in. The Mackerel deals the same damage and swings at the same speed as the Bat, but on each hit on another player, an icon will display in the kill feed showing the weapon's icon in addition to the number of times the victim has been slapped. If you kill them during this time, in the kill feed the number will be replaced by Fish Kill. This is a really neat little feature, but it can also be quite useful because it does not say Fish Kill if you trigger a spy's dead ringer with this weapon, making it useful for keeping track of spies. Other than that, it has no abilities or special knickknacks or downsides other than just being the same as the Bat. Next up, we have the Sandman, a wooden baseball bat with a smooth black grip accompanied by an All Ballers League baseball. The Sandman shares the damage of the bat, dealing 35 damage a hit, 105 damage on criticals, and 47 damage on mini crits. Along with sharing the damage, it also shares the bat's function times with a few things added. It swings every half second like the bat, but it also has a recharge of 15 seconds for the ball. So let's talk about this ball now. When you have the Sandman out, you can press your alternate fire key to throw the baseball at opponents. It deals 15 damage on a normal hit, 45 damage if it's crit boosted, and from 17 to 23 damage if it's a mini crit. On a successful hit, the target will be stunned, with the length of the stun being longer the further the ball traveled. So the further away the enemy is when you throw the ball and you hit them, the longer they'll be stunned, from 1 to 7 seconds. And if the ball is crit boosted, they'll be stunned for an extra 2 seconds on top of that. While stunned, enemy players move at a reduced speed and cannot perform any actions. If you hit your target at an extreme range, the target will suffer a moonshot and become completely immobile for the maximum stun duration. If the ball is thrown at close range, it will deal damage, but it'll inflict no stun. Once thrown, the baseball can be retrieved off the ground to instantly refill its charge, but it only stays on the ground for 15 seconds before despawning, so that's roughly about the time it takes to recharge it. But if you hit a target with the ball, it despawns in about 3 seconds, so if you want to get your ball back after hitting someone, you have to run for it. When you equip the Sandman, you lose 15 max health, bringing the Scout down to 110 health, which significantly reduces his survivability in a fight as well as his overheal a medic can provide him. So by putting this on, you're becoming a lot more fragile. The Sandman ball can be reflected by enemy pyros to stun your teammates, and heavies can still punch while stunned, so be careful if you stun a heavy who has his fists out. So for this next melee weapon, I'm hoping you're all in the mood for Christmas. That's right, we're talking about the Candy Cane, and the name perfectly describes what this weapon looks like. The Candy Cane deals damage identical to the stock bat, dealing 35 damage a hit, 105 damage on a critical hit, and 47 damage on a mini crit. And it even swings at the same speed with an attack interval of half a second. So what makes the Candy Cane special? Well, when it's equipped, even if it's not your active weapon, whenever you get a kill, enemies drop a small health pack. This counts for kills where you finish off the targets, like if they die from fall fall damage or after you shoot them or they blow themselves up, but it will not drop from a spy's feigned death with the dead ringer. So any kill you get where it's you in the kill feed killing someone, they drop a pack. The downside to this is that you will take 25% more explosive damage all the time, so you will have to be extremely cautious of demo men and soldiers when you have this weapon, as they will be able to easily kill you in one shot. Coming up, we have the Boston Basher, every delinquent's favorite weapon. It is a bloodstained wooden club covered with spikes and reinforced with metal bands. The Boston Basher does the same amount of damage as the Bat and the Sandman, dealing 35 damage on a normal hit, 105 damage on a critical hit, and 47 damage on a mini crit. When you successfully land a hit with the Boston Basher, the enemy takes bleed damage as well. Much like the Cleaver, the bleed ticks every half second for 4 damage, giving it 8 damage per second for a total of 40 damage over 5 seconds. If you hit them with a mini crit, the bleed will also mini crit, dealing 5 damage ticks for 10 damage a second, giving a total of 50 damage overall. But the Basher is a double-edged club. If you miss an attack on your enemy, you will take 18 damage and then bleed for 8 damage a second, so you all have to be careful when swinging this weapon around. You don't want to hurt yourself. And when it comes to function times, the Boston Basher swings at the same speed as the stock bat at half a second when the bleed lasts for 5 seconds on enemies or yourself. The self-damage will not take place if you hit a wall, your teammates, or any map props because it's connecting with something. It will also not deal self-damage if you miss a swing while under the effect of an uber charge. The scout takes a small amount of knockback from the self-damage caused by hitting himself that can be used as a third or fourth jump at the cost of some health. So you'll have to be careful and know where you're going and where the health is if you're going to be using it like that. Our next melee weapon is pretty interesting. It's the Sun on a Stick. The Sun on a Stick is a black mace with orange veins topped with a fiery orb and black spikes. Now, the Sun on a Stick deals 25% less damage than the stock bat, making it deal 26 damage on a hit, 79 damage on a critical hit, and 35 damage on mini crit. It does share the function times with the bat, so it swings every half second. When you use the Sun on a Stick, you trade base damage to gain 100% crits against burning targets. That's right, you heard me correctly. Every hit with this weapon against a burning player is a guaranteed critical hit, so that means 79 damage every half second, which may not seem like a lot, but then you factor in how fast the bats swing. It can do some decent damage. It's more of a gimmicky kind of weapon, and it's not something you'll be pulling out. Its more usable feature is its 25% fire resistance while it's active, so if you're being run down by a few pyros, pull this out and it might make that escape that you need. The Fan of War is a really interesting one because it's got some really cool attributes on it. The fan is a large metal Gunbai war fan that deals a crippling 75% less damage than the stock bat, meaning its base damage is only 9 per hit, and even on critical hits it only does 26 damage, which is incredibly low. And it can't even do mini crits, they're just turned into full crits, so that's one upside to its damage. Its function times are identical to the bat's swing speed, so every half second it'll swing, but this weapon doesn't shine for doing damage. No, it's a debuff weapon. When you hit an enemy with the Fan of War, they become marked for death for 15 seconds. This means for 15 seconds, that person is taking 25% more damage from all sources on your team. So say there's a heavy who's just being tanked by like 2 medics. Hit him with the Fan of War, get out, your team can just shred him. Now, it lasts for 15 seconds, but it can only be applied to one player at a time. So if you hit someone else, the mark will be taken off of the last person and put on the newest person you hit, and the duration effect will be reset. This next one goes out to all you scouts who just love to jump. That's right, it's the Atomizer. The Atomizer is an aluminum bat with a black grip and the Bonk logo emblazoned on it with surrounding team color stripes and bands. The Atomizer deals 20% less damage than the normal bat, so on a normal hit it will deal 28 damage, on critical hits it will deal 84 damage, and on mini crits it'll deal 38 damage. It also swings 30% slower than the stock bat, so that means it has an attack interval of about 0.65 seconds. So while the Atomizer doesn't shine doing damage when compared to other melee weapons for Scout, it does grant him the passive ability to jump a third time at the cost of 10 health. Well, this may not seem like the greatest thing ever. If you think about a soldier shooting a rocket at you, you've already used your first 2 jumps, and you can either take that rocket for 70 to 100 damage, or you can spend 10 health and not take any of that damage. It's incredibly powerful in the hands of a scout who knows how to dodge. Okay, last weapon. I know, relieving, right? Let's get on to it. It's the Wrap Assassin, everyone's favorite, I know. The Wrap Assassin is a team-colored roll of wrapping paper accompanied by a team-colored bauble, or ornament, whatever you want to call it. The Wrap Assassin deals 65% less damage than the stock bat, which means it deals 12 damage a hit, 37 damage on a critical, and 17 damage mini crits. You can also throw the bauble out like the Sandman ball, which deals 15 damage on normal hit, 45 damage on a critical, and 20 damage on mini crit bauble. If you connect the bauble onto an enemy, it causes causes them to bleed like the guillotine or the Boston Basher. The bleed ticks every half second for 4 damage, giving it 8 damage a second over 5 seconds for a total of 40 damage. If you hit an enemy with a mini crit boosted ball, it will take 5.4 damage ticks every half second for 10.8 damage a second for 5 seconds, so a total of 54 damage over that time. One last thing to mention about the bauble is it has a very small amount of splash damage when it connects with the surface, dealing 5 damage in the immediate area where it shattered. When it comes to function times, it swings every half second like most all the other scout melee choices, and the ball is a 25% faster recharge than the Sandman, meaning it charges in 11.25 seconds instead of 15 seconds. The bleed lasts for 5 seconds. The bauble cannot be retrieved like the Sandman ball because the bauble breaks on impact, and picking up a Sandman ball will also recharge the bauble. If the bauble is reflected by an enemy pyro, it will deal no damage to friendly players, even though the bleed icon will still appear on their HUD. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I just wanted to take another minute or so, maybe 30 seconds, to just say thank you for watching this. If you sat through all 40 minutes of this, or if you've just clicked around for weapons that you wanted to see, thank you for watching this. It's something I've been working on for a while, and I'm really nervous about how it's going to be taken, and I really want feedback on it. So if there's something you don't like about it, or there's something you wish was changed or done differently, hey, why don't you mention that in the comment section? And I'm really open to criticism on this because this is a series I kind of want to do. I want to do one of these for each of the classes in Team Fortress 2, and obviously I want it to get better with each one I do. But like I said, thank you for watching this, and stick around if you liked it. Maybe I'll make something else that you like. I don't know. Or maybe you didn't really like it and you can tell me why. But that's really all I have. I hope you enjoyed all of this, and have a great day.